Hello, I'm Doug Mansfield, your host for Local Heroes here on WKFK DTV7. Tonight we have a very special program. We're going to talk with Dr. Sid Phillips, a character from the HBO series The Pacific. And we're going to talk about Don Rouse, his friend from Biloxi, Mississippi. Don was killed on Cape Gloucester, New Britain Island. And tonight we reunite Sid Phillips with Don Rouse's personal effects that Sid went through and sent home to the family. So don't go away. Come right back. We'll have that very special, exciting story in just a moment. We're talking with Dr. Sid Phillips, Guadalcanal veteran. Dr. Phillips, you left Guadalcanal on the 22nd of December, 1942.
Correct.
Were you glad to get off of that place?
I better watch what I say. Yes, we were.
Yeah, absolutely you were. You left the island, you were skinny. You had on tattered clothes, but you did have some canned fruit that you had liberated?
A few days before that, we were living on canned fruit at the time we left Guadalcanal.
You were weak. You were so weak that when you got out to the Navy ships, you had to have help getting on board, right? The
Correct.
Navy, yeah.
Most of us could not climb the cargo net.
How did the Navy personnel treat you once you got aboard the ship?
They were very polite, yeah.
Kind of respected what you had been through?
I suppose you could say that, but we didn't know anything. We had been there the entire time. We'd had very little communication with the outside world except letters from home, and we had no news reports, no anything. We did not know how war worked. We did not know that we were the only troops in that part of the world. We just didn't know anything. We had just simply done what we were supposed to do, and had finally been relieved.
And you were relieved to get off of that place?
And we were relieved to get off of that place.
And you left on the President Johnson, and you went to ultimately Melbourne, Australia, and you went to the cricket grounds.
Melbourne Cricket Ground, correct.
And that's where you stayed there?
We stayed there probably 3 months, and then we had a camp in the suburbs of Melbourne at a place called Dandenong. And we would come back to the cricket ground and go back to Dandenong and come back to the cricket ground and go back to Dandenong, off and on.
And while in Melbourne, you got sick and you went to the hospital.
Most everybody was sick when we got to Melbourne, some with malaria, and we all were covered with different skin diseases, dermatology. It would have just been a wonderful place if you'd been a dermatology resident to see all the infections those boys had. But we were in bad shape. We really were.
And while you were in the hospital, there was a nurse there, Army Nurse Corps, and she had you doing hand cleaning of items.
No, I was just made captain of the head again. I was always being made captain of the head. I was captain of the officer's head on the George F. Elliott. And I could clean a head in seconds. I could move that mop around and clean it before you could say boo. And it astounded her how efficient I was at cleaning that head.
Yes, it did. But
in fact, she said I'd make some woman a good wife.
She did exactly say that. And also, when you got a little better, you were a guard, a division guard.
We would catch. You called division guard duty
at a hospital?
Every once in a while. Sometimes it was for the main division brig. Sometimes it would be like on Pavuvu, they had a area there where they developed fresh water. They had pumps and cisterns, and different troops were put on division guard duty. You wouldn't be on division guard duty but maybe 48 hours. And
Bob, while on division guard duty, you met somebody very famous.
Yes, I did. I met Eleanor Roosevelt there at the hospital.
And she asked you, had you been on Guadalcanal? And you said,
Correct.
yes, ma'am.
And I said, yes, ma'am.
And she
said,
asked you other questions, and you continued
said,
to say,
are you being well fed? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, are you being well taken care of? And I said, yes, ma'am.
So it was yes, ma'am, to every
Yes, ma'am, to everything.
Yeah. While y'all were in Australia, you basically...
You know what I've always regretted is I didn't ask her for a motherly kiss as America's mother, you know. I'd have never had to buy another beer if I'd have done that.
That's true. Now, you got something called TS slips in your coffee because coffee was short in Australia, and y'all collected those. And you left Australia and you went to a place called Goodenough Island.
Wonderful name.
Well, it really wasn't very good, though.
No, it was a tropical island.
But it wasn't very good. And one day you were sitting there and you just jumped to your feet and ran, and everybody wondered where you were going, and you had seen something. What did you go?
Well, we were on a hike, and we were, those hikes were always at least 15 miles long. We were going back to our camp, and we took a 10-minute break, and I was sitting there, and I noticed sugar cane growing in a field, and I jumped up, grabbed a machete. About 1 man out of 5 had a machete, and I grabbed a machete and ran over there and cut 6 or so stalks of sugar cane and brought them back to the platoon and passed them out to the southern boys. The northern boys didn't know what they were, but we showed them how to peel the cane and cut it into chewable pieces, and we soon had the whole platoon chewing sugar cane.
And you finished the hike high on sugar.
High on sugar.
In Christmas dinner there, you had the regular Army or whatever turkey, and you got 10 pieces of hard candy. And then you left going to a place called Cape Gloucester.
Correct.
Now, Cape Gloucester was an area where there was just relentless every day without cease most of the time rain.
Rainy season commenced as we went ashore, and the rainy season lasted for months, but it rained, it seemed like all day, all night, the whole time we were there, with maybe the rain stopping for an hour or 2 at a time. But I just don't believe there's ever been anything to equal the rain in the rainy season in the tropics of the South Pacific. It was awful, just awful. Everything rotted. Roads became impassable. Trucks would winch themselves along from tree to tree in order to move through the jungle. Bulldozers would actually disappear down into the mud with the tracks turning and the engine running.
Burning, yeah.
And you just cannot imagine what it is like in a jungle with that endless rain unless you're there. I don't believe words could ever describe it.
But it was miserable, no
But
doubt.
it was miserable, with a capital M.
And you would get your chow sometimes and have to sit in the rain and eat it.
Always. It seemed like we were always eating in the rain.
And sometimes you got oatmeal.
The Marine Corps served oatmeal for breakfast, I think, 9 days out of 10.
And you also got something called a K ration because you were in the Army there.
Correct. Yeah, the Army had a ration they called K ration. The Navy had a ration they called C ration.
Well, you'd already learned to hate the C ration.
We had learned to hate the C rations, and we enjoyed the K rations for about 10 days, and then we learned to hate those too.
And you described firing a mortar in the jungle kind of like firing a mortar through a roof with holes in it.
You know, when you fire an 81 millimeter mortar, the shell comes out of the tube, and the safety pops off of the shell so that it's armed. After it gets 30 feet up in the air, it's a live shell. So you can kill yourself if you are under a tree and the shell hit something going up, and this is called mass clearance. The term is mass clearance. Do you have mass clearance or do you not have mass clearance? So you're always checking for mass clearance, which is no problem in the daytime, but at night you have to try to remember how many degrees you had mass clearance for. Like, you only have mass clearance down to 70 degrees, so you had to stay on your range card above 70 degrees. It's kind of spooky firing a mortar at night in the jungle.
And there was one night where there was only one flashlight working.
Well, they gave us a one-cell flashlight on good enough, and mine was the only one that was working that night, so our number 4 gun was the only gun that could fire. You cannot fire a mortar if you do not level the bubbles. I mean, there's no telling who you'd kill besides yourself.
But you did do that, and you did get commended for your good job.
We did, yeah. They said it was good work.
You were up to like 70 degrees or 75 degrees?
We stayed above 70.
And you walked the HE light shells in within 15 feet of the friendly troops.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
That was a feat in itself.
We were quite proud of it. We felt like we were the best mortar squad in the whole Marine Corps. If you didn't believe us, you could ask us. We'd tell you.
You would. I'm sure you would. Now, you and W.O. took a little tour out into the jungle one day.
We were allowed to explore. We had nothing to do. We had defeated the Japs, and so we would work our way through the jungle. You're very careful. You didn't want to get lost, and we could follow some of the jungle paths and jungle things. And W.O. and I did that. We would see what we could find, and we found a big Japanese supply dump in that deep jungle that was still sitting there. Nobody had done anything to it. And there was another boy with us, Sullivan, and W.O. and I, and we had a fun day that day.
Yeah, you took a Japanese machine gun out of a case and you fired it till it locked up.
Fired it till it froze in its own cloud of steam.
But you found another thing. That was a Japanese hospital.
Yes, we did. On another trip, we found an abandoned Japanese hospital tent. It was about the size of this room, maybe 20 by 30, and the Japanese equipment was all there. There was a beautiful binocular microscope, I remember so vividly, plus all kinds of surgical instruments and all that were laying all around. And then there were maybe 10 dead Japanese on stretchers that were simply skeletons. They decomposed, and that happened so quickly in the jungle. But I remember they still had on their uniforms.
Well, that was an amazing thing to see, that, I'm sure.
It really was.
Don't go away. We'll have more local heroes with Dr. Sid Phillips right after this. Dr. Phillips, when the campaign on Cape Gloucester was over, basically the Japanese were defeated, y'all were just waiting. You were just waiting to get off that island.
Correct.
And you had a big encampment. And you had a bunch of tents there, but there were some big, tall, dead trees all around you.
Jungle.
Jungle. Huge trees.
The whole place was a jungle except for the airport.
Right. Now, as you know, Dr. Phillips, I own the GI Museum in Goshen, Mississippi. And about 9 months ago, a young man showed up at the museum on a Saturday, and he brought in some personal effects of a man by the name of Don Rouse from Biloxi, Mississippi. And at the time, I didn't know you, and at the time I did not have the privilege of reading your book, But he told the story of his uncle, this was his nephew, who was killed, and he mistakenly said Guadalcanal when a tree fell on his tent. So the items are in the museum. And when I got your book, for some odd reason, I opened it to page 96. And on page 96, you described that calm night when a tree fell on your encampment, actually about 20 feet from you.
Correct.
It was really close.
Mm-hmm.
But it fell on Don Rouse's tent. And you had known Don back, all the way back to New River.
Correct.
And Don had been your corporal when you got
Our first corporal. Mm-hmm.
And you liked him because he was a southern boy.
Correct. Biloxi.
Biloxi, Mississippi. Well, Dr. Phillips, the personal effects that Benny, was it Benny asked you to go through?
Lieutenant Benson, yeah, Benny. We called him Benny.
Because you
behind his back.
Behind his back.
Not to his face.
No, you were.
He was Lieutenant Benson.
You called him Benny. But in the book you say Benny asked you to go through Don Rouse's personal effects.
Correct.
Now, by some twist of fate, Don Rouse's personal effects that you may have gone through, and you say you don't remember them exactly, but they look like what you may have gone through, and you say that you did not pay particular attention to everything because it was kind of a sacrilege to. But this is Don Rouse's personal effects that you probably, more than likely, had your hands on that night when you went through them.
True.
And
very, very possible.
There's a bracelet in here, and the bracelet has Guadalcanal on it. It has the date that the campaign started, which was August the 7th, and the date you left, which was December the 22nd. Now you have a book and you have a bunch of signatures in it, but possibly you didn't see Don that day because he was in the intelligence section. And there's a match case there from Australia.
Correct.
It seems to be quite ornate, maybe a gift from someone. And you have Don Rouse's Bible, and in the front of the Bible it has Don Rouse's next of kin listed as his mother, A.B. Rouse, and Porter Avenue in Biloxi, Mississippi. So you knew Don all the way from New River. And his laundry marker. Everyone in the Marine Corps had one of these, did they not?
They did. Mm-hmm.
And that's just D.G. Rouse, and it's from a place in North Carolina, which is pretty close to New River.
Kingston.
Kingston. Mm-hmm. And you've got a watch here with a leather band, razor, which I'm sure you all used. And you've got a pipe and some cigarette cases.
No stem.
No stem. It may not have been. And you got Don Rouse's comb there.
Mm-hmm.
Now later, the family had a portrait of Don painted in his dress blues, and it's very familiar to the picture that's in your book. Now you say it's a little bit better looking than Don actually was, but today we're reuniting Private Sid Phillips with Corporal Don Rouse's personal effects that you went through that night that he was killed on Cape Gloucester. Now, could you tell us or relate to us what happened exactly that night?
It was a calm night. At that moment, it was not raining, and we were all asleep when this thundering kahoomp occurred, and nobody knew what had happened. But a tree had fallen, and fallen across Don's tent. Killed Don, and the other boy in the tent broke both of his legs. He was just caught partially under the tree. But the situation soon developed that we understood what had happened, and they brought the Coleman gas lights from the galley, maybe 5 or 6 of them, and the whole company turned out and lifted this tree off of Don to get his body out. And of course the other boy with the broken legs. And it was just one of those tragic things that happens during war. They said it happened repeatedly on Cape Gloucester, maybe 20 or 30 times. Men were killed by falling trees.
How does it make you feel, Dr. Phillips, to be in the presence of these items again after so many years?
You know, I'm a Christian, and I'm very much of a believer, and the fact that this has occurred is not surprising to me. It happens in my life again and again and again, and to be reunited in a sense with Don doesn't surprise me at all.
Well, I think Don was trying to tell me something, because all the items are on display in the museum, and even his portrait that the family painted, or had painted of him. And every day when I go in the museum, his portrait's always hanging slightly down and to the right. And of course I fix it, and then every day when I go back by it, it's down and to the right again. And maybe he's trying to tell me something, is what I thought. And then when I got your book and read it, I quickly figured out what I needed to do. I needed to reunite Don Rouse's personal effects with possibly the last man in the Marine Corps to handle him, and that was you. And you say you're not surprised.
I'm not surprised at all. Too many things in my life happen that way.
Well, that your reaction is kind of surprising. I'm not surprised either, but I am certainly privileged and honored to, in some way, know Don Rouse, and then now to know you. I mean, and I'm honored to be here today and to reunite you with something that belonged to an old friend of yours. Now, can you relate to us anything about Don? Do you know? Can you tell us anything about Don that we can say on camera?
Don was not a big, tall, strong, physical person. He was rather of slight build, kind of like my friend Eugene Sledge. Don had joined the Marine Corps maybe 2 years before Pearl Harbor, had been to Cuba, and was considered one of the old Marines to us new recruits. And Don was very friendly, easy to get along with, gave us all kinds of good advice and direction. He was my gun corporal for a while, but I really think Don was more inclined to be transferred to the intelligence section of the company. They needed somebody more physical than Don for a gun corporal, and they replaced Don with a boy from Brooklyn named Carp. And Don went into the intelligence section, and Carp became our gun corporal. And the painting that you have brought that the family had done of Don, that is startling. It looks more and more like Don as I look at it. I really think the painting is flattering. I don't think Don was quite that handsome.
There's a picture of Don and yourself in the book, your book, and that will be the book you've done called "You'll Be Sorry." A Guadalcanal Marine remembers the Pacific War, Sid Phillips. And for those of you who don't know, I don't know how you couldn't know, but the HBO series features Dr. Phillips as one of the characters in the HBO series. And the book, of course, is available online. And I highly recommend it. I've read it 3 or 4 times now. And each time I read it, I learn something new, and I'm more fascinated with what you guys had to go through. I mean, you didn't know at the time how important the Guadalcanal operation was.
That's true. We did not at all.
You were just...
We were just there.
You were just Marines. You were just doing your
obeying
job.
orders.
obeying your orders and enduring the absolute horrific, if I may use that word, conditions that you had to endure sometimes. All the way from almost starving to wearing rags to some of the things that you had to go through on Guadalcanal from August the 7th, 1942 to December the 22nd, 1942, which is a long, long time.
There was one boy in my squad named Carl Ransom, and Ransom didn't think that he was brave or heroic being there. Every morning he'd say, if I'd brought my Jesus shoes, I'd have left last night. And I think that was the feeling of all of us.
Did you think that you were ever going to get off of that island?
I really thought at times that we would not. I really did. That we were maybe going to be expendable. You know, the troops in the Philippines were expendable. Those on Wake Island and Guam were expendable. And at times we felt like we were going to be expendable. We knew that wasn't the plan, but we also knew that our country was not yet heavily armed and all like we were even a year later. Even a year later, we were a totally different country. We had great big carriers by the dozens and all.
But you fought with basic leftovers from World War I. Very little equipment, very little food. You were the only troops in the South Pacific.
And we didn't know that.
And you did not know that. You had no idea what was going on. Not until you got either to Australia did you realize the importance of what your mission had been.
Correct. And if we'd have had our Jesus shoes, we'd have left.
You wouldn't have been there. But being the good Christian that you are, I know that you probably had a feeling you would survive that and come home.
We kept holding on to that hope. We really did.
Well, Dr. Phillips, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm honored to be here with Don Rouse's personal effects that you went through the night of his death, and I'm honored to reunite you with them.
It is unbelievable, isn't it?
It is unbelievable,
it really
but
is.
It's happening as I...
The Lord works in mysterious ways.
He does, but he works in good ways also.
That's
so,
truth.
Dr. Phillips, I'm honored that you took the time today, and I appreciate you doing so. And you are truly part of the greatest generation, and I owe my freedom to you today.
I have a comment on that. You know, Tom Brokaw wrote that book, and I think he missed the title. Instead of the greatest generation, we should have been the great generation. That, excuse me, in my opinion, the greatest generation of Americans is yet to come. And it'll be the generation that turns this nation back to God.
We certainly need that.
And I'm hoping this series will be part of it, this Hollywood series.
Well, if you don't believe in God, just watch this episode of Local Heroes. God had something to do with this today.
I feel the same way. I really do.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. I'm honored.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for doing this. And thank you for watching this edition of Local Heroes. Thank you for joining me on this very special edition of Local Heroes here on WKFK DTV7, featuring Dr. Sid Phillips, a Marine in World War II, who is a character in the HBO miniseries The Pacific. To find out how you can obtain a copy of Dr. Phillips' book and to watch archived WKFK Local Heroes shows, go to WKFK.com.